Hello and welcome to the Draft to Digital Spotlight. This is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, and I am honored to have in the virtual studio with me today T.W. Piperbrook. Tyler, welcome to the program.
Hey, Mark, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
I'm delighted to share some of the stuff that you and I have had a chance to chat about one-on-one, both at conferences and virtually. But I'm most fascinated to have people hear your superhero origin story of because you've always dreamed of being a writer, haven't you?
Oh yeah, it's something I've known since I was a little kid. I just always loved reading and writing. So that's, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I can launch right in if you want. But
yeah, because I know we were talking about some of the stuff you did in the early, and this is like pre-internet stuff days.
Oh yeah,
I'm fascinated to share that.
So I'm dating myself a little bit here, but yeah, so I've wanted to be a writer since I was, I mean, it had to be like 8 years old or something.
Yeah.
In elementary school. And I was always big into reading as a kid. And my mom used to read to me a lot and kind of got me into it. And, I remember, I think it must have been like fourth grade or something. I was taking a hike in a local reservoir with my dad and my brother. And he started telling me about this crazy story called the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. And he said, I read this when I was a kid and you got to check it out. And man, I tore through that, everything, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Hobbit, everything. But yeah, like I was saying, I was kind of digging through some of my old stuff, and I must have had a pretty good elementary school, I guess, because at least as far as reading and writing, because they used to have us make these books when I was in like second grade,
right?
And they had some kind of machine that would bind the edges or something, and it would glue the paper together, and we'd create these books, and I just got addicted to it, and to the point that I was a nerd. I was doing extra credit, like, oh, what else can I write? Because I want to make some more of these books because it's so cool.
You still have those books?
I do, yeah. So I found a couple of them, and this is kind of, if I can get them in the camera here. So this was The Old Man and the Genie, and then I had this other one here. What was this one called? Oh, this is a haiku.
Haiku. So these were original haiku. Wow, you're a poet as well. I didn't know that.
Well, I guess I don't know how to look that, but yeah.
So The Old Man and the Genie, is that like an original, like that your fans, the collectors, would be clamoring to maybe buy on eBay one day?
I don't know about that, but it was something. So yeah, I'm trying to get.
Oh, it's typed up too.
Yeah, it was typed up, and we used to do illustrations for it too. So we'd have like.
Oh my goodness.
So it was really cool. I don't know if a lot of elementary schools did that in the 80s. Again, dating myself, but I think that was one of the first memories I have of just. I guess for extra credit, we had like writing prompts we could use for writing fiction. So I would always finish my work early and try to write more books so I could make all these cool books. Yeah, so I've always known that I wanted to be a writer. And as I got a little bit older in air quotes, because it was maybe like, I don't know, fifth grade, I started writing stuff and typing it out on a typewriter manually. And I would send in, press kits or whatever to publishing houses and submit to them to try to get published. And
when you were 15?
Yeah, well, I must have been, I don't know, maybe 10 years old or something. And yeah, and I remember getting some personalized rejections, which was pretty cool back then, because a lot of times you're in the slush pile, you never hear anything back. And I remember some of them, I probably told the story before to some people, but one of them said, you're a very good writer for an 11-year-old, but we're not going to make an offer to publish George and the Robot. So,
why? What's wrong with George and the Robot?
I don't know. They said the characterization was good. I don't know what happened to George, but
so I'm hearing George and the Robot. I'm hearing The Old Man and the Genie. That was the other title.
Yeah,
You were always a speculative fiction writer, or is that?
Yeah, I guess so. There was another one. Was called Disaster for Sale. I remember the title. I don't know where the heck it went, but and that was kind of like an Encyclopedia Brown type of thing. So I was big in like Hardy Boys and Encyclopedia Brown and John Belair's. I don't know if you ever read his stuff, but I got big into that. And as I got older, I got into Christopher Pike and kind of leaned towards the horror stuff a little more.
Yeah.
And then I kind of got into King and Kuntz as I got a little bit older. So yeah, so that was kind of. And then I guess fast forward to.
Well, let's not fast forward. I want to know a little bit more about Tyler sitting there with these rejections from the major publishers. Why didn't you just give up?
Yeah, something about it. I think just even having that dialogue and getting that feedback from them. Because these are, I don't know if maybe they just thought, oh, this is cool because he's a kid. I must have put my age in there, I guess. But a lot of times you won't hear anything, so you don't get any encouragement. So I think the fact that they were actually responding to me and giving me, you know, like, oh, I like this and this and this, and they were giving me some feedback, that kind of drove me to go on. So I had a folder at one point of rejections. I mean, I had to have, I don't know, a couple dozen rejection letters, like personalized ones from the editors back then, which I thought was, I wasn't discouraged. I thought it was cool. I don't know. So, but yeah, so you know, first I used the typewriter, like I said, and then my family was kind of middle class, you know, whatever. So we never really had a computer growing up. I don't think I had one until like college, or maybe I got my own, you know, past that point. But so I remember it was a big deal at one point. My family, they could see how much I liked writing. So they made an investment in a Smith Corona word processor for me with the little 3.5-inch floppies or whatever that you put in. Yeah. So I went to town with that thing, and I was just writing all these stories and saving them. And, you know, I had all those discs, and I got to try to hunt those down and see if those stories are any good. But
so wait, so yeah, most kids your age would have wanted a motorbike or some really cool toy like that, but your toy was the Corona.
Yeah, Corona. Right. Yeah, yeah. I guess a timely name right now, unfortunately. But yeah, the Smith Corona.
Smith Corona. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so I would save all those discs, and I think at one time, I don't know, I guess I was always kind of a mini entrepreneur because I had a brother who was 3 years younger than me, and I remember at one point I hired him to be like, I don't know, like to keep my folders of writing together and stuff, and like little packets of the stories and stuff. And
it's like your assistant that you'd already hired.
Yeah. So I had like a bureau that I had cleaned out like a lot of the clothes, and I had like a drawer with all these folders full of writing, either the typewritten stuff or stuff that I printed out with my word processor or whatever. So yeah, so I just loved it ever since I was a kid, you know.
Oh wow, cool. So then what happened as things progressed? You continued to do writing? How did you get into full-time writing?
Yeah, so what happened was then I went to, you know, high school. I kind of went a couple different directions. I got into music a lot too. So that was another life. But in college I did major in English. So I have a bachelor's degree in English with a minor in marketing. And I wanted to be a teacher at one point because I guess, you know, it's tough, especially this would have been, late 90s, early 2000s when I was in college. And, you know, we didn't have the stuff we have now as indies, where we could self-publish and do everything ourselves. So I guess maybe in one way I kind of had the reality check of a writer isn't something to bank on, so I've got to have something to fall back on. So I was going to be an English teacher at one point, and then I kind of wasn't feeling it. So I did go through and get my degree, and I threw in a marketing minor so I'd have something to fall back on for business.
Okay.
And then I did a couple various jobs, and I was a claims adjuster for an insurance company. That was my first job. I worked at the Hartford Current newspaper in inside sales for a little while. And then I took a detour. I actually did the DIY do-it-yourself music thing. I got into like a punk rock band. So I kind of went that route. Almost, you know, like I got a varied background, I guess you could say.
Now, were you writing the music as well? Were you covering other bands? How were you doing that?
It was mostly original. It was like punk rock and hardcore stuff, like a little bit of metal. So kind of underground stuff. So I left my full-time office job in my early or mid-20s to go on tour full-time. So we were in this band and we signed to a label. It was an independent label, but they signed it. You know, we signed a contract. At one point, we had a video on MTV's Headbangers Ball late at night, like midnight or something.
Oh wow!
So we made a go at it. You know, you don't make too much money doing that, but we got to see the world pretty much. We got to travel up in Canada, in your neck of the woods, and we did a couple full U.S. tours and went to Europe and stuff. And so that was my stint in that. So writing kind of took a little bit of a back burner to music for me for a little while.
Right.
And then I got back into the corporate world. For about 5 years, I worked for a Fortune 500 company. I was a business systems analyst. I kind of worked my way through the company, and I did a couple things there. And that kind of brings me back around to the writing. So when I think I was about 34, I had the typical midlife crisis, and I was at this office job working 70 hours a week, and the company, I was at a tool company, and we just had a big merger with another tool company. Yeah, you can probably guess which ones those are. but so I was doing 70-hour weeks, and I just realized, you know, why am I this age not doing what I wanted to do since I was 8 years old? Why am I not writing books? That's what I wanted to do, and I'm not getting any younger, and this is the time to do it. So I had that thought in the back of my head. And then randomly, we had a work Christmas party for the company that I work for. And it was like a raffle, and they had this big table. We all went out to eat at like this German restaurant. And there was a big raffle table with all these prizes, and we could walk around and kind of check them out. And one of the prizes on the table was a Kindle. And I'd heard of Kindle, but I didn't have one. I was like, oh, cool, a Kindle. Yeah, I love reading, and I'd love to win that. And randomly, out of everybody in the room that day, I won the Kindle. So I feel like it was fate. So,
yeah, it's almost like if your fate was sealed right there.
Yeah.
So you knew ebooks were a thing, and you were still passionate about writing, but you had no idea you could do it yourself at that point, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I started reading. So I got the Kindle. It was one of the early version Kindles. So this had to be like 2011. Yeah, it was the 2011 Christmas.
It was the one that it was chipped out of stone, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was like a blunt object or something. Yeah, but so I remember I bought like I think a Stephen King or a Dean Koontz was the first purchase I made on it, of course. So and I was reading it and I was getting into it, and then I started to see some authors that I didn't recognize. And I started to put two and two together, and I started to do some internet searches, and somehow I came across the K-boards, the Kindle boards, and I started looking around there, and I said, "Oh wow, these are a bunch of writers. It's a writers' cafe," and so of course I'm still working my corporate job, and I start to see these threads on these K-boards, these threads that said like the 50,000 book sold club or the 100,000 book sold club and indie authors. And I was like, wow. I was like, wait a minute. So people are doing this and they're selling books and they're, making some actual money and making a living out of it. And I was just blown away. And I saw among some of those lists, they had like the genre, like it said, some of the authors' names, it would say sci-fi, and some of them said zombie author. It was like 50,000 copies sold, zombie author. I was like, no kidding. I was like, man, this is crazy. So it's actually, what I wanted to do since I was a kid is actually possible now. So that was just like, that was the big spark right there. And I started to read Hugh Howey's Wool. I think it was the summer of 2012. Me and the family went on a vacation to Cape Cod. And I remember laying in bed before bed, reading my Kindle and reading Wool and just being blown away. I said, this is just, the writing is amazing. And this guy's an indie author. I said, this is crazy. And so I remember turning my wife in bed that night. And I said, people are doing this. I said, give me a year. I'm going to be doing this. So I told her, and she didn't laugh at me. So, and maybe it was because, like I said, I had the music detour in my 20s. And I left, a good job to do that, which a lot of people thought was crazy. And we made a go at it. We made it work for 3 or 4 years, and we scraped by, but we made it work. And I never stuck the wife with the bills. That was a promise I made to her. And we, like I said, we had a video on MTV. So nothing big time, but we made it work and we got to travel. So maybe she knew that, I kind of had the drive. I would do my best to make it happen. So anyways, that summer, 2012, I started working on what would be my first novella. It was a series that ended up being kind of my flagship series when it came out. It was called Contamination. It was a zombie series. And it just happened that year, The Walking Dead had just blown up. That was the big, and I love the yeah, it was good timing. I love The Walking Dead, so that was kind of an inspiration. And I was big into the Dawn of the Dead remake, years before and all that stuff. Always loved zombies. So I worked on that, and I chose a pen name because I figured, I'm a little rusty here. It's been a little while, so I don't know how this is going to go over. So let me choose a pen name, which, as you can see, is T.W. Piperbrook. I ended up sticking with it. So I put out it was a novella, the first Contamination. I put that out in October of 2012.
Okay.
Had no idea what to expect. And I sold about, a good 20 or 30 copies, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's, it's something. There's people that I don't know that are buying it, and I just got to work on a prequel. So I did book 0, second. So I had book 0 and book 1, and things started picking up a little more. And then I did book 2. I think I released that in the spring of 2013, and I started to see like a big uptick because suddenly I had 3 things feeding into each other, and I was starting to figure out the marketing. And if I make the first book free, then I can start to drive sales to the other books. And it kind of
was the prequel free, or was the prequel a reader magnet for the newsletter? How did those 3 things work together?
Yeah, so what I did, I had the book 0, so Contamination 0, I would make free.
Okay.
And then I had book 1 was I think $2.99 at the time, and then book 2 was $2.99. But I saw right when book 2 came out, suddenly I had 3 things. I saw the sales spike up, and I started to see some actual money, and I was like, okay. So that was the point. I actually took the leap and left the job. I told the wife, I said, I think I can see the writing on the wall. If I really persevere at this, I think I can make a go at this. And again, she didn't bat an eye. God bless her. And I took the leap. And I say within a year or two, I had doubled my corporate salary. After
Wow.
that.
So wait, within a year or two, you had doubled what you were making corporate in your corporate job.
Yeah. So the first month that I left the job, again, I left early. So I think I made $400. So,
yeah.
But then what happened?
Which is still pretty phenomenal, actually, in your first month to actually make that much, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was, like I said, I could see, just knowing it was possible, seeing other people doing it, starting to figure out the marketing, starting to get my feet wet with, producing content and enjoying myself along the way. And I mean, it's fun. So what kind of really propelled me, I think, right after that third novella, which was actually book 2, because I had the 0, 1, and 2, was the fall of 2013. I ended up bundling together. I'd written one more book, actually. So I bundled together books 0 to 3 into a box set. Okay. And then I released a book 4, and I got a BookBub promotion, a featured deal. And it was for 99 cents on my box set for Contamination books 0 to 3. Okay. And this was November 2013. So maybe, I don't know, 6 months after I had, left the job, whatever. And it just, it blew up because a 99-cent box set on BookBub at that time, suddenly just thousands and thousands of copies were sold. And I ended up making the top, best-selling horror authors. And at one point, I remember the screenshot. It was King, Kuntz, and me. so I grabbed that screenshot. I was like, "Wow, that's a trip." My 8 or 10-year-old self would be like, "Wow, that's unbelievable."
Do you have that dry mounted on a wall somewhere in the house just to remind yourself when you're having a bad day?
I should, though. I should. So from there, I guess I was inspired to keep going, and I just haven't stopped. So. I actually left my old corporate job on May 1st, so I call that my writerversary.
Oh, well, it was pretty close to your writerversary.
Yep,
how many years ago was that?
So 7 years. It was 2013.
I didn't get you anything. I'm so sorry. I should have gotten you a little cake or something.
All right, we'll take a rain check.
So Contagion was the first breakaway series, but you do actually have other series that you've released as well. How many books are in Contagion? And
Contamination has got
Contamination. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. No. I've got 8. I want to say 8 books in that series. So it's book 0 to 7, and then I've got like a standalone called Contamination: Dead Instinct. So I've got 8 books in that series, and it's pretty much complete. So I ended up releasing the complete series recently.
So let's talk about the standalone. So you've got the series that basically from the prequel. It's continuing storyline where there's continuity, so it makes sense to read them in order, I imagine. And then what's the standalone? What was the purpose of that? Was it to fulfill a need you had as a creative person, or was it reader demand? Like, what was the reason for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I basically had the series, and to your point, it is pretty, it's a logical read from 0 to 7. Although I do follow some different characters in the later books, so they can almost stand alone, but it's it does kind of follow a progression. So there's actually a marketing reason behind that. So I was wide, so I was through all platforms at that point, which was the strategy that I was using. So I was through Apple and Nook and everybody. And then Amazon had just announced Kindle Unlimited, and I had everything wide, and I was happy with the way things were going, but I wanted to dip a toe into Kindle Unlimited. And I said, well, maybe I can have something that can stand on its own. But those readers can check it out, and if they like it, then they can pick up the rest of the series.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be contingent on reading everything. So I wrote a standalone in the same universe that ideally can be read alone, although it's tough to avoid spoilers for the actual plot line because there's kind of a conspiracy-ish sort of thing going on in the so there was a little tough to write a standalone, but I did that, and again it was to put it in Kindle Unlimited to kind of test that market out.
Okay, so, cool. Cool. Yeah. I always find it fascinating to understand the methodology, and sometimes there's multiple reasons why you do a particular thing. Then, so what are some of the other series books that you've written?
I've got a series called Outage, and that was the second series I wrote. And that's a little bit more horror. So that was based on a snowstorm that we had. I'm out of Connecticut, so we had a big snowstorm in 2011. It was called Storm Alfred, and it was very early in the season, so it was around Halloween. Halloween actually ended up being canceled. It was canceled that year, like they said.
Oh,
nobody went to it. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Did they have 2 Halloweens the next year to make up for it?
No, I wish. So, I think my kid was maybe 1.5 at that point, so he didn't miss it too much.
Okay.
But I missed it because Halloween's my favorite holiday. So,
yes.
But there was a crazy storm that they didn't expect, and it dropped a whole bunch of, like, I think they expected a few inches or something, and it dropped over 1 foot of snow. And the problem was that because all the trees still had all their leaves on them and everything,
the
weight of the snow was so heavy that it was breaking all the trees, like all the limbs down over the power lines. So over half the state was without power by the end of the storm. So there was, like, I don't know what it was, 500,000 people, whatever it was crazy. And it was also freezing cold. So I remember I woke up, again, my kid was like 1.5. I woke up in bed at maybe I don't know, 11 or midnight, and it was just freezing. And we didn't realize the power was out, the heat was off. Right. And I got up, it was freezing. I look out the window and there's just snow everywhere. It was like crazy. And we started to see some people. I was in kind of a small, kind of blue collarish town. So nobody really had generators there or anything. We certainly didn't. So we were watching people just leaving because it was so cold. And I don't know if they're going to relatives or hotels or what. They were just, so everyone in our neighborhood is leaving, and we've got a 1.5-year-old. So we said, all right, well, let's just bundle up for the night and see in the morning, what we're going to do. And we ended up figuring it out, went to a relative or whatever. But I just realized, it's, again, another one of those kind of catastrophic things where you realize, like, there was trees down in our road, so we couldn't get out. There was logistical problems.
Right.
We actually went to try to get a motel room, and there was just people all over the waiting room. Like, there was no rooms left. Like, you couldn't get in. And there was just, so you just, like, again, logistically, you realize, wow, like all the, everything's down. So I just had this idea of what if there was a huge snowstorm like this, and there's like, I think my cell phone had no service for some reason, and the home phone was out. So there was just no communication. Like, it was apocalyptic, basically. I said, what would happen if someone, what if you sprinkled werewolves on this situation? So I had I call it the Great Storm, and I basically had where there's always been werewolves, and they had this. They basically come out when there's these catastrophes and just feast on people because there's no, everyone's so all over the place, they can't stop it. So that was kind of, it's a werewolf series, so a little more horror, but it's definitely post-apocalyptic. So. And
so the werewolves are like the zombies, right? They're not the main characters. It's not from their point of view. They're the creatures that are coming out of the dark. Oh, okay. No spoilers.
Yeah, no spoilers. Yeah, because obviously werewolves can go, from human to werewolf. So there's some twists.
Oh, of course, some intrigue there.
Yeah. Where zombies usually don't go back. Once you're a zombie, that's what.
Yeah, they're not just wolves. They're okay. Get it.
Yeah. So I had some fun with that.
What's the appeal then that you found in writing post-apocalyptic fiction? Because you've been hugely successful in that genre.
Yeah, I just, like I said, I kind of have a horror, like King and Kuntz and all that kind of background. I've always liked the thriller horror kind of lean. And just post-apocalyptic stuff is just really fun. Yeah, I've just found a love for it. Just, I don't know, destroying the world in various ways and just seeing how people survive. And, like a lot of people will tell you with Walking Dead or whatever, it's more about the people and the connections and the bonds they make and how they survive than it is about whatever the monster is, and that's, I don't know, that's what always drew me to it, just how people survive through stuff like that,
Yeah. So the snowstorm in Connecticut, it wasn't even winter yet, right? It was the fall. Was obviously the genesis for that. Where did the zombies come from? Was it you walk around in the dark stumbling because you were groggy in your sleep, and like where did the zombies come for that series?
Yeah. So I think that was a mixture of, again, I'm reaching back now because it's been a while since I wrote that series. But I actually saw an article I think it was on Yahoo or something, and it was about I guess the smallest town in the United States. And there was a population of, I think it was 3, and it was Beaufort, Wyoming, I want to say.
Okay.
And it was about, I think actually the population might have been 1 or something. It was a guy who owned a gas station, and then there was like abandoned buildings around him. There was like there used to be a post office. So it used to be like a little miniature town, But and so it had its own zip code because it had a post office. But this guy was literally the only resident of the town, so he owned his own town. He was called the mayor of Beaufort, I think. So I saw that, and it just intrigued me. And then I started, I don't know why, I was just like, you know, what if there was a zombie invasion? Because every zombie story you see, it always starts off in a very populated area for the most part, right? It's in like a city and everything's crazy, and that's kind of what makes it really interesting. I was like, what if it started a little more subtly, like in a small area like that? And then I thought, well, what if it was like a small town and someone kind of orchestrated it, and it was kind of like a trial run for something else, like they purposely did something, or they purposely contaminated something to kind of make people into these zombies. So that's sort of, it was like my own spin on it. And like I said, The Walking Dead was on around then, and I really was enjoying that. So I want to kind of give it my own flavor. And that's, I guess it was a marriage of a couple of ideas, you know?
All right. That's cool. I want to go back briefly to your stint as a musician on stage and touring. I'm curious to know, because you've always been a creative person, you've always been a writer. During those years, you said that you kind of abandoned writing, but you were writing music and performing. There's got to have been a fulfillment aspect of that creative energy and outlet, or was there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I was primarily a guitarist, but later on, I was in a band where I sang, so I was writing lyrics. So yeah, to your point, I was kind of doing some of the writing there. But yeah, just creating things, and you know, I think there's a lot of parallels, well, for creatives in general, but a lot of parallels between music and writing, where you have like the writing of the riffs is almost like the rough drafting,
yeah,
right? And then when you're recording, it's like, you know, maybe your mixing is like your editing, and then the mastering of the finished product, say, is like the final proofread or something, right? So, and then the release of the album is the release of the book. So there's just a lot of correlation there.
Yeah.
So I think, and then, like I said, I was in kind of like underground music a little more. So there was a lot of, like, we booked our own tours. Like, we had a booking agent, and I primarily dealt with the booking agent. So I was involved in the business aspect of that. And when we were on the label, me and a couple of other guys flew out to meet with the label and stuff. And so, yeah, so there was a lot of parallels there with just, you know, not only the creative side, but the business side, and also a lot of the indie. I mean, it was indie music, really. So this is indie book. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of tie in there.
Is there any, now that you're, you know, successful full-time writer, doing really, really well, do you dabble in music still at any point?
Yeah, actually, we're supposed to have a big reunion with my old band this year. There's a big festival in Alabama. I'm not sure if it's going to happen now, obviously, with everything going on, but we were going to do some reunion shows for our old album, 15-year reunion shows.
Sweet.
Yeah, so I still kind of dabble here and there. And like I said, we were going to get together. We're all set to do that this year, of course, of all years, right? But so rain check on that one too, I guess. But
now, were there parallels between performing in front of an audience and the feedback that you get as a writer? Obviously, with a series, with an author newsletter, stuff like that, that there's got to be parallels, but also differences in the interaction.
Yeah, I mean, the music stuff was a lot more real-time interaction, real-time feedback, because we played a lot of, you know, shows and concerts where, you know, you got a big audience. Like, we played some fests in Europe where there's a ton of people, not there for us specifically, but, you know, they had like a lot of big bands. Like, one of the fests had Alice in Chains on it and Motorhead. And so there was a lot of, you know, there was thousands and thousands of people there. So when you're playing, you're getting immediate feedback by way of reaction, you know? So there you get that feedback. Whereas a reaction for an author obviously is more like, I guess, reviews or emails and stuff like that. So it's a little less like immediate or, you know, not in person, obviously, you know, it's more virtual reaction, I guess.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're getting close to the half-hour mark into this. I'm going to start taking some comments from the live audience. Questions, comments. First one coming up is Zach. Zach says, I had a word processor like that. Well, my dad did, but I would borrow it to write stories and stuff. So Zach, nice. I guess, is dating himself too, isn't he?
I guess so.
Or maybe his dad was your age, Tyler. That's possible too.
No, that could be. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Yeah. So no typewriters back then, I guess. He had okay.
Or the Smith Corona electronic machine or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's what I had. Yep. I think there was the Brother and the Smith Corona were like the two models I remember from Walmart or whatever. Yeah.
That's cool. Another question coming up, and this is from Vaughn. And Vaughn asks, "Is Contamination available on audio?" And we haven't even talked about audiobooks yet.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, it is. Yep. I have a really cool narrator, Troy Duran, did a great job. That was actually my first audiobook, was Contamination. So that's out there. The full series is out there, and you can get that box set that I was talking about, Contamination 0 to 3. Is a good starter for that. So if you use a
the entire box set is available in audio.
That one I only have books 0 to 3 in a box set, and then books 4 to 7 are individual.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but they're all in audio. Yeah. So, and Troy did a great job on it. So
that's cool. How did you find Troy?
I had actually looked around a little bit, and I kind of stumbled on him. He'd done a couple horror books, I think, at that point. And I just really liked his voice. I said, man, this guy sounds great. And I contacted him, and he agreed to do a royalty share deal with me, which was really cool of him. And yeah, I was just kind of blown away with it. So he did that whole series, and he did the whole Outage series too.
Okay, cool. And then was the Outage series the collaboration that you and I had been talking about earlier? Or
yeah. The Last Survivors. I don't know if we've talked about that yet. That's a collaboration I did with another post-apocalyptic author.
Okay. Well, can you tell us a little bit more about that collaboration? Because I'd heard you were very successful with the audio in specific on that series. Yeah.
So that one around 2014, so a couple of years into it. Well, thanks, Zach. Appreciate that. Yeah, I'm sure Troy does too. Yeah, around 2014, I was in a box set by with Jay Thorne, one of Zach's friends too, all of our mutual friend. Because back then there was a lot of multi-author box sets on Amazon, where authors were getting together and they were all putting in one book of their series into these box sets as kind of like a lead-in, and promoting. We'd all promote those box sets so that people could check them out and see if they liked all the individual author stories. So I reached out to another author from one of the box sets, another zombie author, and initially I had wanted to do like an anthology. I was thinking about maybe getting like 4 zombie authors together, and we'd each write like an original story in our zombie world and then cross-promoting that way.
Yeah.
And I think there was some crossed wires there, and this guy is Bobby Adair was his name. And he says, "Oh, you want to write a book together?" And I was like, "Well, hey, we could do that too." so we ended up writing The Last Survivors, and I had never collaborated on something that big before. I'd done a little collaboration on something else, but so that went really well. We ended up writing a 6-book series. That's, again, it's done really, really well. And audio specifically, recently we put out a audiobook of the complete series, and that's done very, very well in audio, and it's been hanging out in the post-apocalyptic charts. And so yeah, it was a lot of fun doing that.
Has your audio proceeds or funds coming in, are they catching up to your ebook sales?
Yeah, it's funny because yeah, I had a buddy the other day, just one of my, another friend that's not really in the writing realm so much, but he said, "So do you make most of your money on ebooks or audio?" And I said, "Ebook." Wait a minute. I started to look at the sales, and I guess primarily because of that one box set, I said, audio has overtaken ebooks for me right now at the moment. They're both doing very well, but audio is really just leapt up there, partially because of this box set, and I think audio in general is just growing a lot too lately. I've heard that from a lot of people. So yeah,
it probably doesn't hurt that you have a lot of product out there as well. So once people discover one, then they can kind of say, "Hey, this what was his name? Troy Duran was your narrator.
Yeah,
they love your writing. They love Troy's voice. They're just going to go with it."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think everything feeds off each other. So the more backlist you have out, the more chance you have to cross promote. Or to your point, if someone likes one, then they'll probably check out another. Hopefully. So
cool. Thanks. I'm just going to pop up this question so we can say it. So Vaughn asked, "What is your pen name again?"
Yep, this is it. It's TW Piperbrook.
Cool. And you can find you at twpiperbrook.com to check out all your great stuff that's going on there. Yeah, comment. I think the audiobooks are great. We saw that comment. And so Jamie says, "Just wanted to say Tyler's Sandstorm series rocks, but we haven't talked about that series yet. Let's talk a little bit about Sandstorm. What is that all about? And more importantly, what was it inspired by?"
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thanks, Jamie. I appreciate that. It's really nice. Yeah, that one is a little bit different, but it kind of has a post-apocalyptic lean too. So that one was, it's basically on another planet, which is different than my other series. So
sci-fi first, not horror first. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. It's more sci-fi, but like I said, it's got a little bit of a post-apocalyptic feel. So It's basically, there's a colony that's stranded on this desert planet. They've been stranded there for generations, so they really don't know a lot about, like, they've had no contact with Earth for many generations, and they're just barely scraping by. And, you know, it's a colony of only a couple thousand people. And there's this one girl that's a hunter, and she goes out and then, you know, she provides for her brothers. They don't have any parents left. And she goes out in the desert and in the middle of this sandstorm and kind of runs into some trouble. She comes across first a guy from another colony, and she never knew any other colonies existed. And then another menace kind of threatens them. So I won't say too much, but so there's a little bit of conspiracy in there, a little bit of mystery, you know, stuff like that. But that's actually a complete series now. It's a 4-book series, and I just put that in a box set too, so people can check it out. Because obviously, with everything going on now, I ended up just bundling a lot of my box sets together so people can just binge read the whole series for cheap. And
so, now's the perfect time for binging, isn't it? When we're all self-isolating, etc.
Yeah.
So cool, and that's a great recommendation from Jamie. I love that. So the other couple things I want to talk about is your strategy for funnel. We talked a little bit about that with your first series in terms of the book 0 and book 2 and book 1 and how you manipulated it. How do you do that in general, especially with so many different ways people can come into the TW Piperbrook universes?
Yeah, right now, like I said, I'm doing a new, I mean, I guess it's sort of a strategy, but it also, I guess, benefits everyone ideally is I have everything I've ever written right now is in a complete series box set.
What, the entire TW Piperbrook universe is all in one handy package?
Not quite. Well, not each series individually is in its own box set.
Oh, okay. So, it's
yeah, like I think that file would blow the Amazon server.
99 cents. No.
So I've got 5 complete series. Is pretty much everything I've ever written, other than that Contamination standalone. That's still out by itself, and then some other anthology stories. But everything else, you can get it in its own complete series. So I have 5 series out now. I've got Contamination, Outage, Sandstorm, The Last Survivors, and then The Ruins, which was a sequel series to The Last Survivors that I wrote by myself. So those are all 5 series that I've written, and they're all in box sets. So right now I'm pretty much all in on letting people binge things, partially because of what's going on right now, and also because I'm using Kindle Unlimited right now, and it works out well with the page reads.
Right.
But yeah, in the past I've been wide, you know, on all platforms, and I've done, you know, where you have the first book free and then the rest of the books are paid. So people will check it out. If they like the first book, they can check out the other ones. I've done stuff like that. Or I've had like that Contamination box set that's not the full series, but, you know, books 0 through 3. At one point I had that free, the whole box set, but not the whole series. 0 to 3 is all free. And the books 4 to 7 are all individually priced. Okay. I've tried different strategies and things. And, you know, I think a lot of that's just a matter of keeping up on podcasts and everything and seeing what works and trying new things.
Of course. Yeah. So when you're writing individually, like self, and when you're writing with a collaborator, do you find that you approach the writing in a different way?
I'd say, yeah. It's strange because when I first started out with Contamination at the very beginning, I was a pantser. So I just, you know, I wrote everything by the seat of my pants. You know, I figured it out as I went. And of course, you'd edit it and make everything cohesive and whatever. But I was a total pantser. And then when I did that collaboration with Bobby, you know, we were both pantsers, and then we would kind of have plot meetings and stuff. And then we'd kind of go off, and we each did our own point of view characters. And then we'd circle back around and read each other's stuff. And we'd realize there's some stuff that wasn't quite jiving because, you know, we didn't have it outlined enough. So long story short, we slowly progressed to outliners by the end of collaborating on that series together. So
by the end of the series, you had started to outline because you're like, we could save ourselves a little bit of time.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So we started to use Trello as an app. We use that, and it's like little note cards basically on the computer. And I actually flew out to meet him. I think we'd written 2 or 3 books before we actually met in person. You know, so how did you connect with Bobby initially? Yeah, that was the box set with Jay Thorne there where I'd reached. Oh, that's right. You had mentioned that. That's right. And you decided, let's do this. Yeah, so we knew each other just basically over the phone and stuff. And then we, you know, after writing a few books together and things were going well, I flew out to Texas and we met. And it was a productive trip because I think we outlined like the next 2 books or something on sticky notes on his kitchen table or whatever. So Yeah.
Okay,
So,
yeah, that's fantastic. So, speaking of collaboration and meeting other writers and networking, I know you and I were hanging out together virtually this last weekend at the Career Author Summit.
Mhm.
And we actually last May, we met in person for the first time at the Rock Apocalypse. I imagine you at an apocalyptic event.
Oh,
Oh, they're in Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame, yeah. So, yeah, we met there. Yep, about a
How
year ago.
valuable are those kinds of events for authors?
I missed a little bit of that. What would you say?
Sorry, how valuable are those kind of events for authors?
Oh, I think those are great. Yeah, I hadn't been to too many. I mean, like I said, I've been full-time about 7 years, and until about maybe a year and a half ago, I hadn't been to any until I went to Zach Bohannon and Jay Thorne. They had the Night of the Writing Dead in Pittsburgh. I think was my
How could you not go as a zombie writer?
What's that?
How could you not go to that one as being a zombie?
Of course. Yeah. So yeah, just meeting people there in person, it was there was just this energy to it that was just so cool, and you know, everyone could just kind of geek out together and share strategies and talk about writing, which, you know, a lot of my non-writing buddies, you know, their eyes probably glaze over when I talk about writing. So it's like, not really, they like the writing, but just the business side of it too. It's just really cool to get in a room with a lot of like-minded people. So I've been to a couple of events since. You know, I met you at Rock and Pock last year, and then we just did the Career Author Summit virtually, and then last year it was in person. So yeah, it's just a whole different vibe, and it's just really, really cool. Yeah, there's nothing like being in person. So,
did you have any introverted tendencies that you had to get over to go to an event like that, or was it just natural for you? Well, you've been on stage before too, right?
Yeah, I think you know, doing the music thing, I was used to being on stage and stuff, and then you know, I've done a couple panels now in some of these conferences. But yeah, I guess in a way, I'm sort of an introvert extrovert. It's like I really enjoy, you know, doing stuff, but then I'm also able to kind of be a hermit and just, you know, hole up in my office and just write my books too. So I got that side too, you know.
Cool. Now, the very first panel we had the pleasure of being on together was I think Zach Bohannon was the moderator, asking us questions, and the questions were about the future of publishing. And so I'm curious to get your thoughts on where you think the business of publishing is going, especially now with what's going on in the world.
I think we're in a good spot. I mean, everything I've been reading lately, you know, obviously keep up on all the podcasts and articles, and it seems like ebooks and audiobooks are both doing really well right now. And obviously it's a tough time, but I think it's good, cheap entertainment, you know, for people. And, you know, as writers, we're able to make a living out of it because, you know, a lot of us are just, you know, sole proprietors. We're just doing our own thing. We don't have much overhead. We can do it from home, you know, so there's a lot of leeway there and room to make some money off it. But like I said, I think we're in a good spot. You know, I think, you know, people in quarantine right now are looking for something to do, and ebooks are still fairly cheap, and everything seems to be growing. You know, audio ebooks are all growing. So I think things are going fairly well right now. So
it's funny you talked about overhead, and I have to run the comparison because the overhead to begin an indie author career is probably a lot less expensive than the overhead of the guitar, the amp, the tour bus, or whatever, the van or whatever you have to all pile into. Absolutely. I mean, that's a significant difference, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The tough thing there too is you got to split everything with 5 guys. So.
Oh, that's right. Yes. So the $100 you get for the gig is like divided 5 ways.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And then you got to travel from one place to another, because usually you're in a different city every night. And, you know, and back when I was touring, CDs were still more of a thing. So we were able to sell CDs, and now obviously everything's, you know, Spotify or streaming or whatever. So yeah, it's tougher to do that for sure.
So we're sitting here in the future. We're looking at all of the amazing things that you've done, the digital production you have created, the readers around the world that are loving the different books you've written. Let's go back in time, and we find ourselves in a small town somewhere in Middletown, America, and there's a musician on the stage just finishing his punk rock set, and you recognize him. That was you many years ago. And when they come off stage for a break, what sort of advice, what advice would you give him looking forward those next 10 years?
Yeah, as far as becoming a writer, you mean, and getting into
the guy who dreamed of being a writer.
Yeah, I'd say it's possible. I guess the two words, right? The key words, it's possible. It will be possible because basically technology made it possible. I don't think I would have imagined it back when I was a kid or even at that point that I'd be able to make a living doing this. It's just amazing. It's an amazing time, and like I said, there's not much overhead. There's not much that you need to get started other than your imagination and a keyboard, right? So it's
awesome. Well, Tyler, thank you so much for stimulating our imaginations, inspiring us. Let listeners know where they can find out more about you and check you out.
Sure. Yeah, I'm at twpiperbrook.com. Or I'm on Facebook. I think it's facebook.com/twpiperbrook. So
awesome. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark.